Welcome dreamers. Ready to relax and unwind? Get comfy and let our soft night tales take you to magical places. Enjoy.
Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff, with nothing below you but an endless expanse of fog. The sun has set, and there's no light to guide you forward. In the distance, a soft glow appears, faint but steady. It's not much, but it's enough. Or at least, it used to be. Now, what happens when that light begins to flicker? When the thing you've trusted the most begins to fade? Would you let go of everything you know and try to find a new path in the dark, or would you hold on to the familiar, even as it slips away? Let me take you to a quiet little village, far from the busy cities, tucked away in a peaceful valley where the wind whispers softly through the trees. A village that's known for one thing above all else, the Watchlight. A great, glowing beacon that stood tall for generations, lighting up the night and keeping the shadows at bay. It's the heart of the village, the thing that has guided countless travelers back home after long journeys. It's been a symbol of safety, of comfort, and most of all, of hope. But something's changed. For the first time in decades, the Watchlight is flickering. It's not as bright as it used to be, and people are starting to notice. They're scared, but they don't know what to do about it. They don't know why it's dimming or where to look for answers. The village, so used to the steady glow, feels a strange sense of unease creeping in, and there's one person who can't seem to shake the feeling that something must be done. Her name is Kala. Kala is an ordinary girl, living an ordinary life in the village of Edwind. She spent every evening watching the Watchlight shine from her window, knowing that as long as it burned brightly, everything was all right in the world. But these past few weeks, every time she looked out, there was something different. The light seemed a little dimmer, as if it were struggling to stay alive. Now, Kala wasn't one to get overly worked up about things, but she couldn't shake the feeling in her chest. The Watchlight wasn't just some ordinary lantern or lamp. It was a symbol. More than that, it was a gift, something given to the village by the Starfolk, an ancient race that lived high in the mountains. Her grandmother had told her stories about the Starfolk, about their shining city of Lirin, a place bathed in starlight, where the sky itself seemed alive with magic. As the days passed, the light grew weaker. At night, Kala couldn't sleep. She'd lie awake, staring at the distant flicker, wondering if anyone else had noticed it. But when she asked the elders or even her parents, they just shrugged it off, saying things like, "Oh, it's just the seasons changing," or "It's probably nothing to worry about." But Kala felt deep down in her bones that it was more than that. She knew, somehow, that the Watchlight was dying. And if it went out, what would happen to the village? What would happen to the people who had relied on it for so long? One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the village, Kala decided she couldn't wait any longer. She had to find out what was happening to the Watchlight, what was causing it to fade. There was only one place she could start, the base of the tower, where the Watchlight stood. It wasn't a place people often visited. After all, the Watchlight had always done its job, and nobody felt the need to go near it. But now, Kala couldn't ignore the call any longer. She slipped on her boots and pulled her cloak tightly around her shoulders. The wind was picking up, sending little gusts of cold air through the streets. Her lantern swung gently in her hand, casting a soft golden glow that barely cut through the growing darkness. As she made her way through the village, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the silence. It was as though the whole village had held its breath, waiting for something. She passed the homes of her neighbors, many of whom were already inside, their windows glowing warmly with candlelight. But tonight, even the warmth of home felt distant, as though the village itself was losing its warmth. The trees that lined the paths seemed taller, their branches swaying, but not with the usual soft rhythm. They groaned, creaking as though something was pulling them in the wrong direction. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Kala reached the base of the tower where the Watchlight stood. The sight that greeted her wasn't what she expected. The light, once a warm golden beacon, now cast a faint, pale glow. It flickered in and out of focus, as though the very air around it was unstable. There was no warmth to the glow anymore. Just cold, empty light. But as Kala drew closer, she noticed something strange, a small crack in the earth at the base of the tower, barely visible unless you were standing right on top of it. The crack seemed to pulse with a faint blue light, a strange contrast to the dim glow of the watchlight. Kala knelt down, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the crack. The moment her fingers brushed against it, a strange sensation rippled through her body. It wasn't painful, but it was like a sudden rush of cold air, and she could feel something stirring deep inside the earth beneath her feet. As she leaned in closer, she saw a faint thread of light, almost like a silver ribbon, winding its way into the crack. It pulsed softly, rhythmically, like the heartbeat of the world itself. Kala's breath caught in her throat. She'd never seen anything like it before. It was as though the watchlight's very essence had begun to bleed into the earth below it, pulling away from the village. She had to know more. But before she could react, something inside the crack shifted. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and the faint thread of light grew brighter. A vision flashed before her eyes, bright, swirling stars, a distant city floating in the sky, and the sound of soft voices, singing a song so beautiful that her heart ached with the memory of it. Then, just as quickly, the vision was gone. Kala pulled back, her mind racing. What was that? Was it a warning? Or something worse? The crack began to widen, and the thread of light grew brighter, almost blinding in its intensity. Kala took a step back, not sure whether she should run or stay. Her heart raced as she looked up at the fading watchlight above her. The village was counting on this light to survive the nights, and without it, what would happen? Would they be left in darkness? Would everything they had ever known fall apart? Before she could process the enormity of what was happening, she heard something behind her, a soft whisper, like a voice carried on the wind. She spun around, but there was no one there. The wind carried the voice again, this time clearer. You've seen what we've tried to hide. The bond is broken. Kala froze, her eyes wide. She had heard the legends, the Starfolk, who had once protected the Watchlight, had left long ago. The city of Lirin, shining in the sky, was now nothing more than a story. But here, in this quiet valley, the thread of light told a different story. The bond between the Starfolk and the village had begun to unravel. And if she didn't act, the Watchlight would fade, and everything would fall into darkness. Kala clenched her fists, determination welling up inside her. She wasn't about to let that happen. She had to find the Starfolk, wherever they were, and convince them to restore the light. With a deep breath, Kala turned back toward the village. The light was fading, yes, but the thread of hope she had found in the earth told her something more. The Starfolk hadn't abandoned them, they were still here, in some form, tied to the land and the very light that had guided them all these years. But that bond was fragile. If she was going to save the village, she would have to journey farther than she ever imagined, to places beyond the known world. Kala knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But she wasn't alone, she had the stars to guide her, and the memory of the Watchlight to keep her going. There was always hope, even in the darkest moments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more peaceful journeys and bedtime tales. Thank you for being part of our community.